This is Scott Becker with the Becker Private Equity and Business Podcast. We bring to you regularly short business episodes, short private equity episodes, also interviews with brilliant business and private equity colleagues. We try and make sure people learn something, they come away a little entertained, and a lot more. Liz Hutson is with us today. She's one of our most listened to guests. She's a brilliant person who started sort of as an engineer, built her own consulting firm, consults with private equity funds and invest in device companies, other kind of healthcare companies. Spent a long time of her career at Cardinal Health. Just a brilliant person. Liz, why don't you take a second to introduce yourself, and then we'll talk about this topic, which is executing well and finishing the year well. Take a moment and tell us about Liz Hutson.
That sounds great. Thank you, Scott. Yeah, I'm Liz Hutson, and as you said, I'm the founder and principal consultant of a healthcare products and services consulting firm called EGH LLC, and we are focused on the private equity space. As I'm, bringing my head up a little bit here at the middle of September, I'm realizing we just have a little more than 3 months of the year to wrap things up and finish the year strong. And so what I thought we would chat about today has to do with how we narrow in on those goals and close the year of 2024 out strong.
Thank you. And how do you sort of do that? How do you stay focused, motivated, keep it going the whole year? Sometimes it seems like it comes easy to me. Sometimes it's hard to me. How do you suggest, or how do you do it?
Yeah, no, thanks, Scott. So I think there's a few things. Top of the year, I think in January, end of December, we're all pumped up about the year that's following, and we set some goals for ourselves. And now it's a good time. We're wrapping up third quarter and rolling into the final quarter of the year to just go back and revisit those goals and see how you're doing against them. I actually spent some time doing that this past weekend, in fact. And for some of us, we don't do New Year's resolutions or don't do beginning of the year's goals. That's fine. But there's probably some things as you're looking out to finish up that you want to see yourself do well, right? So whether it might be business related, fitness related, family related, whatever that might be, what are those things that you want to do and focus in on? So I think the first thing that I do in this is to look at my game plan for the end of the year and look and see what is it that I want to accomplish. And one of the ahas that I had for myself was that I think I'm spread a little too thin. I think I have too many goals and not enough time. And oftentimes what happens is when we make everything a priority, nothing's a priority anymore. So I'm working on narrowing that list down and saying, okay, what are those just 1 to 2 things I'm going to drill down on and finish those things really, really well and get very specific on how I want to accomplish them. And, I use SMART goals, specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time bound. I use SMART goal methodology for my goals. And I think that really helps with that focus on the goals and how I want to refine them.
No, and talk about that, and talk about sort of like as you sort out the most important things. Like one of my favorite books is by a sports psychologist, business psychologist named Jason Selk, talks too much about channel capacity. How many things can you actually try and get done? Talk a little bit about the challenge of figuring out, there's so many things you want to do. How do you focus on what really needs to be done?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think it's such an important thing. I think a lot of times we put so many things on the list and we feel very accomplished because there's all these things that we want to do. When in reality, when we have too many things on that list, nothing really gets done. So what I like to do is I like to pull myself back up and remind myself of what are my grander vision goals for my life, for myself, for this period in my life, and what kind of legacy do I want to leave, right? What is that really, really big picture? And I think sometimes when we get lost in the minutia, whatever pops up in our inbox or whatever text we get or whatever we see on LinkedIn that morning, we react to them, right? It's not a strategic focus on that. Rather, it would be better than to step back and say, who is it that I'm trying to become? Who do I want to be? And then when I think about that, then the things that are moving me towards that person, that ideal version of myself that I'm trying to make myself better tomorrow than I am today and who I was before, I start to think about what are those 1 to 2 things that help me progress in that direction. So I think, how do I answer that question the way you like, how do I focus on the 1 to 2 things? I think it's really just reminding myself of the big picture and what is that next step that I want to take to keep that moving. And, I think there's a point of visualization in that too, like visualizing what that amazing thing looks like in the future. When I've achieved that goal, what does that feel like? How do I behave when that happens? What does that enable? And, I think a lot of times when I get stuck in the slog of things and I just don't feel like doing things anymore, when I connect to that bigger picture, it helps me make decisions a lot more smartly, but it also helps me trudge through the times when I just don't feel like it.
Totally. No, I couldn't agree more. And when you get excited about something, how do you sort things out so you can really focus on what you want to focus on? That's the most important thing.
Yeah, I think the part around the big picture is one piece of that. And then I think bringing it into what I call daily disciplines, right? So these are, back to my comment before around sometimes I just don't feel like it. I wake up in the morning and I'm like, I don't really want to do that. And it's not about a feeling, right? It's about a commitment. And so when I make that commitment and I make that decision to say, okay, of the 10 things that are on my list today or on my list this quarter, I'm just going to hone in on these 2 here because they tie to the big picture. They tie to the idealized visual that I have of where I want to go next. Now I've got that in my mind. Now, what next? Now I get into those daily disciplines around what I need to do each day, regardless of how I feel for that day, regardless of, whether I'm excited about it at that moment or not. I've made a commitment to it because it lines up with a bigger picture something. And so I'm going to commit to it. And, Scott, when I think back on points in my life where I feel very proud of an accomplishment that I made or a goal that I had set out for myself that was hard, it was heavy. When I look back at why I was so successful at those times, it's the ones that were hard fought. And it's when I persevered through those, when I felt like it and when I didn't feel like that. And sometimes even pushing through it when I didn't feel like it is when I saw the biggest progress happen. And so I think, it really is, what are the things that who do I want to be? What are the goals that I want to do to make that happen? And then just kind of digging in and going daily, I'm going to make this happen. Every single day, I will chip away at this, whether I feel like it or not.
And that's one of the great challenges is to actually find that focus on the days when you don't want to do it. I mean, that's sometimes the great challenge, isn't it?
It is. It really is.
And you sort of put in the work on those days and then hope on the days where you're really excited, you might do better work, but at least you're chipping away on the other days.
That's right. That's right.
And then how do you give yourself time to recover when you know you're driving towards stuff and just need to recover because you know that the quality work you're doing is not at the level you want it to be?
This, Scott, I think is something is hard for me to do, but it's something that I have found that when I do that, I'm much better off. And so, I think for people that are driven, like you, like myself, like a lot of the people that we work with or have encountered, we're so driven and we're going. We don't take that time for rest. And I think you're right. The quality of the work that we have, our thought process, our creativity starts to diminish. So building in rest time is not something that, is for the lazy. It's actually for the very wise, I think. And so, for me, I know for sure at the top of each year, I'm going to take a couple of days for sure where I clear my schedule and I really just kind of rest. I reflect on what's happened before, where I want to go next. And I don't have any activity that's happening in those couple of days. For sure that's built in. But I think what I need to do better at, and I found myself, after chasing a pretty hefty goal for myself this year, not taking the time for rest when that was done was a mistake on my part. And I think, we start to drag, we start to get a little irritable. We start to not feel as creative and excited about the next thing. And so I think building in that space for that is so wise. And I think, again, for people that are go-getters, it's hard to allow yourself the time and grace to make that happen. But it's an extremely powerful tool to be even better afterwards.
No, I think that's right. And it is challenging because sometimes you're scared if you slow down, you won't get back going. And so trying to find that
Yeah.
right balance of recovering and getting back at it. And I think it's a
Yeah.
constant, a constant balance, but fascinating. In any event, Liz, it's always just a pleasure to visit with you. The very best. Thank you for joining us again on the Becker Private Equity and Business Podcast. And to those listening, always feel free to suggest ideas and topics to Scott Becker, 773-766-5322. Thank you so much for listening. And Liz, always great to visit with you. You're fantastic. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Scott. Great to talk with you.